All right. Shalom once again. Shalom Rastafari. Let's do a little word picture on this Ki TAVO. Ki TAVO Begebahim Gizeh, when you enter the 50th portion. Now, we're at Deuteronomy chapter 26 and 5, and it says, upon the law of the offering of the first fruits, the law of the offering of the first fruits, it says, and thou shalt speak and say before Yahweh Eloheka, before the Lord thy God, Amlakeh Egiziaveher Lotusabhat, a Syrian ready to perish was my father, and he went down into Egypt and became there a nation, great, mighty, and populous. Well, this father is Abraham. Now here is some said the Nubian Islamic or the Nawabian, Dr. York, the Imam Isa, but this particular picture, you understand, an image, because we have to learn once again to see the biblical characters in our own image. This has a lot to do with even the present debate about black males and the educational disparities between black males and even black females. You understand, but especially for the black males, to recognize in this particular Torah portion where it speaks to your male singular, so speaking to the black man's responsibility, you understand, and to us as the lost sheep. So this is Abraham, right? Our father Abraham. Now, the next part of the verse, let's go to our suitcase right here. And this particular picture right here, let us open this particular picture here, and we have the Hebrews making mud bricks from the tomb of Rekhmere, the vizier in Thebes, Luxor tomb, TT 100 they call it, and it's dated to the period of Thutmose, Thought is born, Thutmose, or Tehut Muse in our Ethiopic reconstruction. This name would be Tehut and Muse, both Ethiopic terminologies. Now, Thutmose the third, and here we have some of the scenes that are to be spoken upon the law or the offering of the first fruits, the Hebrew Hotep or Hetepu, the Hetep offering or the first fruits offering, where we are to say that a Syrian ready to perish. Now, here's something that is kind of interesting when we look at these terminologies. If you were to read a Hebraic Masoretic Chumash, in that it basically states an Aramean. Now here we have this Bible right here, and let's go down to this right here where it says in verse 5, King James, it says, and thou shalt speak and say before the Lord thy God, a Syrian ready to perish, right? Then over here in this particular Bible right here, it's a Jehovah Witness Bible, just comparing the translation, where at verse 5 up here, it says Jehovah, before Jehovah your God, my father was a perishing Assyrian. Now that it has that asterisk, and we go now to the bottom of the page right here. It says, my father was a perishing Aramaean. Right, according to, I think that might be the Masoretic or that manuscript, and S.Y. Syriac says, my father was led to Aram, and there's a Oromo connection that's interesting with that too, but we'll touch on that with a feet, y'all will. And now there's the LXX, which is the Septuagint, which says, my father cast off Syria. So now we have Abraham, you understand, now we have Abraham, the Syrian, you understand, or the Assyrian. Now, we did a video a little while ago about the black Assyrians, right? About the black Assyrians. And that video is connected with this particular Torah portion and the theme in this particular Torah portion right here. So here we see verse 6. When we look at verse 6, let us look at verse 6 right here. Verse 6 says, "And the Egyptians evil entreated us and afflicted us and laid us in hard bondage, in hard servitude, barnet, in a servant status, the only status that our people had at that time, you understand, due to the particular circumstances, which are very interesting. You understand? They're very interesting, the circumstances concerning this time. And this is the approximate time of Tahutmose, or Thought, is born. You understand? But the name in the Ethiopic reconstruction, Tahutmose, you understand, would be humble Moses, like a humble Moses. Now, Muse Bamarinya is the head of fraternal order. Now, remember our father, Abraham. What does it say in the scripture? It says that a Syrian ready to perish, was my father, and he went down into Egypt. So these are two different periods in time that we see pictured here in word pictures. Two different periods of time. The earlier period of time with our father Abraham, a black Assyrian or an Osirian. Now, see, we have to go back to the context and reconstruct the history in order to then be able to read the archaeology and the evidence correctly. You know, when we start to look at ancient Assyria, and we thought we wouldn't go here, but it's probably necessary to go here. Let us bring this up right here. Bring up this visual so one can see some visuals. And this is from a very good website right here. It's called Real History, and it speaks of the ancient man and his first civilizations, additional photos of artifacts from Sumer, Elam, and Assyria. And if we read the information correctly and contextually, one thing that we will begin to notice is that there's a certain time period, and we see images changing gradually over different time periods, reflecting, for lack of a better word, certain racial types. This is what we saw again the second. These are some latter periods. But as we go to the earlier period, we can see the Cushitic, or from the period of Namrud. Now, this is interesting right here. Look at these brothers right here. Look at that peppercorn. You understand? The peppercorn, the peasy heads right there, right? Look at the features. You understand? There's other images where when you now look at that, right, and these would be the Syrians, right? The Syrians, the latter Assyrians. And this is from the palace of Sennacherib. That's a biblical name, right? And it says, flaying Hebrews after the siege and capture of the city of Lachish. That's also there in the Bible. It says, under King Rehoboam, one of Solomon's sons, you understand, Solomon's later son, not the firstborn, Menelik, you understand, but the next born one, the second born one. It says it became the second most important city of the kingdom of Judah. Now, it says in 701 BC, during the revolt of King Hezekiah against Assyria. Now, this is a latter period. This is way later than our father, the perishing Assyrian or Osirian, you understand, Abraham. But if we look down here, it says that in the period of the revolt of King Hezekiah against Assyria, it was captured by Assyrian king Sennacherib despite determined resistance. So here we can see clearly that these are the Israelites, where they're saying this is the period of time. You can see clearly the blackness and the features and the type of hair. You understand, Europeans, almost never in archaeology do you see them having that kind of hair. So you can't even go there. You understand? Here's the Syrians attacking a fort underwater. So in the archaeology and through the archaeology, you understand, we can see those evidences, Assyrian attacking Elamites. So it's both later and earlier periods of history based on what's been preserved in archaeology that's demonstrated here. You understand? That's demonstrated in some of these pictures. Now this site has a lot of very interesting and useful information. This will be so-called Arabs, but some of this, the author or the publisher of this site has demonstrated that some of it might have been altered based on looking at older pictures, when you look at older and later pictures. But then even in some of the earlier images, you will see the Hamitic or black stock, you understand, in the features, you understand, in the features of the people. I mean, it's almost too clear. I mean, it's very clear. It should be very clear, you understand, the earlier types. Now, these were the types that came over there with Namrud. Well, these right here is some of the types: man carrying offering. When we go to the oldest civilization, there is an Cushitic or Ethiopic influence on this particular culture, and the author has a couple other pages. We didn't intend to go through this sort of a demonstration in detail, but while we're here, we at least want to see some of our archaeology, ancient ancestors, which are connected with the context of the time. Based on our reconstruction, what we can see basically has gone on. It seems as though there was the earlier black influence, and then there were others coming from the Far East, like where China is and other areas. Now, look at this king right here. This is Ur-Nammu, a close-up. You can see the Ptah style. If you notice, this is that early style like we wear in a skull cap. This here is a foundation figure of King Ur-Nammu. Now we're going to approximate time of Abraham. There was a whole shift that was going on in that part of the world, and some of it was racial too. We can say that black civilization, or the black Cushitic presence, was being overturned by invaders. You know, it's too simplistic to just say black and white in the sense that we know black and white today, but basically that was what would come down to this whole black and white, you understand, where watered down cultures and other cultures took over from ancient black civilizations, and many times carried on the civilizations. But you see some key difference. Here's a little bit of ancient pornography. You know, you can see that right there, but we're not going to spend too much time on that. So this is Abraham, the black Syrian or Assyrian, our father. You understand, that came out from Syria. See, there's a preservation of the true black seed coming from that ancient time, coming from that Noahic line that Abraham was about, while there were reptilians. Now that may sound a little bit too, that's stripping it down to what we know of it today, that influence moving from the Far East. That's part of what this Tower of Babel story is really behind. The Tower of Babel story, since people in that time understood that story. A lot of details are not found there because it was just to reflect, well, you know, such and such and such, so forth and so on. Well, that happened and this happened, so forth and so on. So we're going to continue from here, water feet, but we just wanted to demonstrate and show Abraham. And while we're here, let's just touch on a couple of other picture images, some other word pictures that may be very useful. We have a couple other pictures of Abraham, in this set right here, Abraham, Sarah, and his wife Sarah. You understand? And there's an Egyptian link there. That's what it's talking about, how he went down to Egypt. You understand? He went down to Egypt with Let's just open it like this. He went down to Egypt with his family. Then Abraham and his 2 sons. You understand? And his 2 sons. Right here, Sarah. You know, it'll mention that later on where it'll talk about Sarah, our mother, you know, and our father. And it'll mention names that might not seem on the surface as African, but you have to remember the so-called African or black influence. You understand? And the black racial type is more than what European scholarship or historians, they try to give you just 1 or 2 tribal types and exaggerate them and then say that this is where you're from. But it goes much deeper. Here's Ishmael, the black Cushitic Arabs, you understand? Abraham, there's Yitzhak, you understand? Yitzhak, the first and the blackest Jew, you understand? And that was originally a religious type, a religious order, just like the Hebrews. Now, it's key and it's interesting when the scripture tells us that he went down to Egypt and he became a mighty, a great people, a mighty population. You understand? How did that just happen? You understand? It's connected with Abraham being called a Hebrew and us understanding Hebrew more than just racially as it's so-called understood today, especially by white supremacy. It was a certain religious idea, a certain idea connected with the true interpretation of God. And there were others that, you have to remember that in all these ancient civilizations, there was, one can simply say good versus evil going on. You understand? The good influences that were the ancient civilization were being taken over by other influences. So there's a preservation of the truth. And this is what comes through Father Abraham to us today. So stay tuned. Shabbat Shalom.